I accept this award on behalf of the civil rights movement." These words, spoken by Martin Luther King Jr. in 1964, represent a declaration of the struggles and dreams of countless individuals fighting for justice. At a time when America was engulfed in racial tension, King's acceptance resonated far beyond Oslo, reaching every corner of a nation yearning for change. The 1960s were defined by fierce struggles for civil rights, as African Americans faced systemic racism and violent oppression. The civil rights movement was a response, a call for freedom and equality. Amidst this backdrop, King emerged as a beacon of hope. His philosophy of nonviolence, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, sparked nationwide movements demanding change through peaceful protest. King was driven by a deep faith in humanity and the power of love. He fought not just for legislative change but for the soul of America. He faced dire threats to his life yet stood resolute, envisioning a nation where people would be judged by character, not skin color. By the time King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, he had achieved what many thought impossible. His leadership during the Birmingham campaign exposed the brutal realities of segregation, revealing that this was not just a Southern issue but a moral issue for all Americans. Receiving the Nobel Prize at 35 made King the youngest recipient in history, elevating the civil rights struggle to an international stage. He was no longer just an American figure, he became a symbol of hope for oppressed people everywhere, resonating with those fighting for freedom across the globe. But this honor was not just an accolade, it was a challenge. King understood its significance and accepted it with gratitude but also responsibility. He used his platform to elevate the silenced voices, advocating not just for civil rights but for a broader peace encompassing social and economic justice. His acceptance speech in Oslo remains one of his most powerful addresses, linking poverty and racial injustice, proclaiming, "Peace is not merely the absence of violence, it is the presence of justice." As he stood before a global audience, his message was clear: the struggle for civil rights was intertwined with the fight for human dignity everywhere. His acceptance catalyzed a global movement for justice, inspiring countless others to stand against oppression. Within days of receiving the award, King intensified his efforts, organizing marches and rallies. The Selma to Montgomery marches became emblematic of his resolve, asserting hope and dignity in the face of oppression. His words crossed oceans, igniting movements against colonialism and sparking uprisings for liberation. Back home, struggles continued, and the prize drew both attention and fierce opposition. King faced mounting pressure but remained undeterred. He knew the fight for equality was far from over. The Nobel Prize illuminated not just progress but the many battles ahead. His stirring speeches resonated through the ages, reminding the world that the quest for justice was universal. These words would echo in minds of countless activists, igniting movements against systems of inequality. King's Nobel Peace Prize did not diminish the dangers he faced, it illuminated them. Amid bomb threats and violent attacks, his resolve strengthened. He became a symbol of resilience, inspiring generations to believe in the power of love, unity, and courage. With the weight of history upon his shoulders, King transformed the Nobel Peace Prize from a personal accolade into a clarion call for justice. As he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in December 1964, he highlighted the struggles faced by millions. His words reverberated across the Atlantic, compelling the world to recognize ongoing injustices. Returning to the U.S., King faced intensified scrutiny, yet his resolve shone brightest. He launched the Freedom Now campaign, galvanizing young activists united by the dream of justice. Each march became a resurgence of hope against hate. King's acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize marked a pivotal moment that ignited a flame of activism worldwide. His commitment to nonviolence influenced future generations, inspiring movements for justice around the globe. The Nobel Peace Prize did not merely honor King, it illuminated a path for change, urging men and women to rise against tyranny and injustice. His legacy endures as a testament to the power of peaceful resistance. In Oslo, on December 10, 1964, King stood before an audience, clutching a Nobel Peace Prize that symbolized a mounting struggle for justice. With empathy and urgency, he spoke not just of his victories, but of the shared struggles for dignity. He emphasized that his fight encompassed a broader quest for human rights. King's defining moment was a proclamation against violence and hatred. He articulated a vision where justice flowed like a mighty river and encouraged love in the face of hatred. His words resonated deeply, urging a unified response to oppression. The reverberations of his speech reached far beyond the auditorium, becoming an anthem for activists across continents. His Nobel Peace Prize was a reminder that the struggle for justice is ongoing and requires relentless dedication. In that moment, King became a symbol of hope, courage, and righteousness. His speech was a powerful call for justice, urging all to stand up and act. His legacy continues to inspire, reminding us that we can be agents of change, fighting against tyranny with love. King's impact is felt today, from the Black Lives Matter movement to global struggles for freedom. His legacy challenges us to confront inequality, advocating for those silenced. The fight against poverty, women's rights, and environmental justice are intertwined with his vision of a just society. As we reflect on King's legacy, we must ask ourselves what role we will play. The journey toward equality requires courage and action. Each of us is called to challenge injustices, advocate for equity, and embody the principles of love, justice, and nonviolence. Let us carry forward his message, creating a world where justice prevails, love conquers hate, and every individual is valued. The world needs us to rise, to be the change King envisioned. We must be both dreamers and doers, laboring for a more just society. Let King's legacy inspire us to act, striving for a brighter future. In his acceptance speech, King painted a vivid picture of the conditions that oppressed not just African Americans, but countless individuals around the world. He spoke of poverty that shackles lives, of discrimination that stifles dreams, and of violence that tears apart humanity. He reminded his audience that true peace cannot be achieved in isolation, it must be a collective effort to eradicate the roots of injustice. He recounted specific instances of the struggle, recalling the brutal attack on marchers in Selma on Bloody Sunday, March 7, 1965, an event that galvanized national outrage and led directly to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. King felt the weight of those beaten and the cries of those silenced. Inside, he was both heartbroken and resolute, understanding that their sacrifices served a higher purpose, that dismantling systemic racism required unwavering courage. In the days following the Nobel Prize recognition, King's calendar filled with meetings, speeches, and planning sessions. He convened with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta, rallying his leaders around the next steps. The urgency was palpable. He felt the pressing need to inject hope back into communities battered by years of oppression. King envisioned a series of nonviolent protests aiming to secure voting rights for every citizen, regardless of race. Each protest became a beacon of hope, drawing attention to the unyielding spirit of the civil rights movement. Picture the scene: Selma, Alabama, with its dusty roads and weary faces, yet filled with determination. King, leading from the front, marched hand in hand with diverse groups of individuals. This was not merely an African American struggle, it was a multiracial coalition rising to demand justice. With every step they took, they echoed the sentiment, "We shall overcome." The chant swelled, reverberating through the crowd, breathing life into their shared aspirations. In a poignant moment during one of the marches, King turned to the crowd, his voice rising above the noise of determination. "We are not makers of history, we are made by history." The words resonated, invoking a collective awareness of their place in a larger narrative, a narrative of change, resilience, and an unquenchable thirst for justice amid despair. King's philosophy of nonviolence was not merely a tactic, it was an act of profound courage. He understood that love, when confronted with hate, has the power to transform the human heart. He drew inspiration from the teachings of Jesus and Gandhi, preaching that the most potent weapon in the struggle against oppression was not violence but the unwavering power of love. It was a counterintuitive approach at the time, yet it illuminated the path for many. He believed that nonviolence could disrupt the cycle of hatred and lead to reconciliation. However, each march left King vulnerable to threats and violence. His commitment to nonviolence was met with disdain by many, including opponents who saw his efforts as a challenge to the status quo. Yet, despite the threats, he remained unyielding. "I have decided to stick with love," he proclaimed, "hate is too great a burden to bear." These words were not just a mantra, they were a guiding principle that shaped his every action. In 1965, as King continued to garner national and international attention, he launched the Chicago campaign, aiming to address housing discrimination in the North. This was a pivotal moment as he realized that racism was not confined to the South. Campaigns in urban centers illustrated the complexity of racial injustice, encompassing practices that bred inequity in housing, education, and employment. King's efforts painted a clearer picture of the pervasive nature of racism across the nation, fostering a deeper understanding of the systemic barriers that needed dismantling. In a powerful speech delivered in Chicago, King stated, "There is nothing more tragic than a young boy or girl who has to ask themselves each day, 'Am I worthy?'" His poignant plea resonated with audiences, shedding light on the psychological toll of systemic racism. For King, the fight for justice was not solely about changing laws but transforming hearts and minds. He sought to instill a sense of worthiness within every individual regardless of race. The momentum was building, yet the opposition grew fiercer. King faced the threat of violence daily. His house was bombed, and threats against his life became commonplace. But he continued to rise above, finding strength in the teachings of love and resilience. "I am not afraid of the future," he said, "for I have seen the future, and I know that it is rooted in justice." As he reflected on his journey, King became acutely aware of the interconnectedness of struggles around the globe. The civil rights movement resonated with those fighting against colonialism in Africa, against oppression in Vietnam, and against poverty everywhere. He boldly stated, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," a reminder that the fight for human rights was a global endeavor that transcended borders. By the end of 1965, as King continued to navigate through numerous challenges, he embarked on an ambitious campaign to address economic inequality. He understood that the civil rights movement needed to evolve into a movement for economic justice, a realization that culminated in the Poor People's Campaign, which sought to unite marginalized communities across the country in a fight for economic equity. King saw the systemic issues of poverty as intertwined with racial injustice. He was clear on this: "The time has come for us to go from the framing of a civil rights agenda to the framing of an economic justice agenda." As King moved into 1966, his vision expanded, yet the challenges intensified. The power of his voice rang out louder than ever, inspiring individuals to take action. He faced increasing dissent within the movement, as voices began to diverge on strategies and tactics. Younger activists began to question the effectiveness of nonviolence, advocating for different approaches. Yet, amid this internal conflict, King held steadfast to his principles, always reiterating the importance of nonviolent resistance, stating, "We must meet hate with love." As 1967 approached, King increasingly turned his gaze towards the Vietnam War. He recognized the war as a complex moral and political issue, asserting that the fight against racism, poverty, and militarism were inextricably linked. In a powerful address at Riverside Church in New York City, he spoke candidly against the war, stating, "We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation." His words transcended racial boundaries, appealing to the moral conscience of the nation and urging individuals to question the injustices that often went unchallenged. He later declared that the war was diverting resources from the fight against poverty, emphasizing that the same government that was policing the streets at home was also dropping bombs abroad. King's courageous stance against the Vietnam War drew both admiration and vilification. It was at this moment that he fully embraced the title of a revolutionary leader, willing to challenge the establishment in multiple facets.